So, welcome everyone. Thank you guys for joining us for today's Digging In session. Let me pull up my right PowerPoint here to get us started. So welcome to the last Digging In with TPS-MTSU webinar for 2020. So today we are going to be focusing on graphic media. And also today is the first time we're going to be broadcasting the session also live on our Facebook page. So hopefully we'll have some folks join us on there today as well. So just a couple quick things, just reminders again as we get started. Please keep your mics muted as we are recording this, and we'll also be posting this on our TPS-MTSU YouTube page later on. If you would, for those of you attending live with us on Zoom, go ahead and rename yourself so that as we are chatting with each other, that we'll be able to kind of know first and last names of who we're talking with. And we do want the session to be interactive. So for those of you, again, on the Zoom with us, feel free to go ahead and open up your chat box, introduce yourselves. We will be, commenting, asking questions, asking for observations in that chat box throughout the presentation. You also have the opportunity to use the reaction buttons, and we are going to be doing some polling later on in the session. And just a reminder, of course, that we do have a Padlet that we use for this webinar series. And the Padlet is where you can go to find the link to each month's newsletter. Also where you can find all of the resources that are mentioned in this session, and of course, any of the sessions that we've done thus far in this series. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Stacey Graham, who's going to talk with us a little bit about the theme for this month.
Thank you, Kira. I'm going to share my screen so we can take a look at wrong one. Sorry. I opened up the wrong Google Chrome screen, pardon me. Okay, so there we go. So now you can see the newsletter. I'm going to make it larger so it's easier for you to see on the screen and for those of you who are watching on Facebook. So we chose graphic media, which really can mean so many different things. And of course, we've used graphic media primary sources in so many of our different materials before. But we just kind of wanted to explore this format of a primary source a bit deeper. And when I was trying to define what graphic media was, I came across a bit of an irony that, graphic comes from the Greek word meaning to write, but we always think of graphic as something that's visual that you see instead of read. So we think in terms of pictures when we think of graphic media. That's what it's become to, what it's come to mean to us. Graphic media can be anything that really, illustrations, posters, even photographs, if they're manipulated. Graphic media can be political cartoons and comic strips. It can be, large scale illustrations and engravings. Over the different eras of history, of course, the different technological formats for producing graphic media have changed. So you can use it to talk about technological developments. Graphic media usually is something that ties in very closely with popular culture and consumerist culture and propaganda too. So there's all sorts of different kind of socioeconomic issues that you can talk about with this type of primary source. But the best thing about graphic media is your students like it better than text for the most part. Everyone seems to be a bit more visually oriented these days, and your students, of course, very much so. So this is your chance to teach them that even if they're looking at a poster that has no words on it, they're still reading it in a way. And so this is how you help them analyze, well, your brain is actually picking apart different pieces of this to interpret it to you. So what is it that you're doing to it? And but at least it has this sort of immediacy, and it has this sort of It's really great when you're teaching differentiated learners, when you're teaching people who maybe don't speak English or don't read English very well. And so it does have a way of reaching a wider audience and kind of engaging your students a bit more. And of course, it also opens up ways that you can work with different art projects, in your school too. So talk about that on the theme page. Our awesome source, now I'm satisfied, the Rural Electrification Administration. So that we just have a little question about that. We're going to go over a lot of these later, and but we're going to feature the workplace communication lesson plan, as well as some of the other poster collections that the Library of Congress is particularly rich in. So I'm actually going to hand it back to Kira so that she can start talking about our featured lesson idea.
Thank you, Stacy. So let me bring up. And as always, things on Zoom are in the wrong place. All right. So the lesson idea that I want to feature is our idea about workplace communication, but it's really more about using posters as a communication tool. So one thing that I always have really loved about the Library of Congress is their poster collections. And so thinking about some different ways that we could utilize those poster collections to meet different types of curriculum standards, and especially for subject areas outside of just history and social studies. We do those a lot, but we do want to think about how we can bridge the gap and meet standards for other curriculum areas too. So for this one, let's start out with thinking about just how we use posters. What is the purpose of some different types of posters that we see in the world around us today? So in the chat box, if you would make note of some different uses for posters that you are familiar with in everyday life. So advertising, warnings, using them in the classroom, promoting events, informational. Yeah, so there's lots of different purposes. I also think about posters that we have, oftentimes that your kids will have in their rooms. Sometimes it's decoration, right? It's art, those kind of things, greetings, announcements. Yeah, so lots of different types of purposes that we can use the posters for. So for this particular lesson idea, I am using posters in two different collections. And these are two really fun collections. So again, if you want to get in and really just kind of explore some of the options that are there, these are two that I highly recommend. So the first one is the artist poster collection. And so this one is just it's one of those broad headings. There's over 4,000 posters in this collection spanning a very large time period. So thinking about these two examples that I've pulled out here, so the first one we see there on the left, is advertising a Hawaii fly-by clipper. So what is the purpose of this poster, do you think? Right, it's tourism. We're promoting, going to this exotic location. Definitely wanting to sell Pan Am as a business, as a way to get to these remote, exotic places. So that's definitely kind of what we're trying to do here in this particular poster. I really think it's a very beautiful poster. The imagery that's there, the color palette that's used. So I think this is a really fun one. Now the one on the right, so this one, it's USIA, it's the United States Information Agency. And at the bottom, in case you can't see it, it says, write the Board of Examiners for the Foreign Service, Washington, D.C. So what do you think the purpose of this poster is? Yeah, it's a recruitment poster. We're trying to encourage people to join the Foreign Service. Looking at the imagery there, anybody want to guess what time period that's from? 60s. I can't remember actually the 60s or 70s, but yeah, it's definitely got that like psychedelic feel to it. So yeah, these are two that really popped out at me as I was kind of looking through some examples today that I think are just kind of really good, fun examples of different posters in this collection. But to show you the range of what you can find, here are two others that are also in that collection. So the one on the left, International Workers' Day. Again, we see this one has got a lot more text on it, and in a combination of both English and Spanish. So what do we think the purpose of this one is? Right, where it's a demonstration. We're trying to promote an event, get people to come out for the activities that are happening there. It's definitely publicizing a cause. So yeah, so again, very different purpose, very different type imagery, and type of poster that we're seeing compared to the other two. Now, the last one that we have here on the right, the one that says "Watch the Fords Go By." What do we think this one is? Right, it's the Ford V8 engines. So we're advertising, of course, a product here. So again, we see the range here, and you can see with these, there's lots of different types of posters that you could use, and a lot of really interesting different approaches to kind of the graphics. Yeah, and it's interesting that one doesn't have a car in it. We're advertising that, but the only thing we see is the V8 and the eyeball. It's a really interesting imagery there. So the other collection that we're going to look at is the WPA poster collection. And of course, this poster is from the Work Progress Administration, which is a New Deal program. And a lot of times when we think about posters that we find from those programs from that time period, we think a lot about the World War II posters that we see. And so the first two that we see on this slide, of course, are examples that we think of from those types of imagery. So we've got the one on the left, are you helping with salvage? So again, thinking about what kind of contributions people could be doing on the home front to benefit the overall war effort. And then the one on the right, volunteer for civilian defense. So again, both of these advertising ways that people could get involved with the war effort at home. But what's really fun about the WPA poster collection, of course, is that there are other topics that you see in that beyond just kind of things promoting war effort. So here are two good examples of that. So we have this one here on the left, which top says January, a year of good reading ahead. And so this was created for a literacy project in Illinois. And so again, we see this poster promoting childhood literacy, education. So again, very different type of purpose than the other two. And then the one on the right, which I don't remember seeing before, Stacy, when I were talking about it, since maybe it was used years and years ago with some of our TPS products. But this one here is talking about, this is the market where the storekeeper buys the food and brings it to his store near your house. And so this poster course talking about the supply chain, how it is that we're connecting the farmers and their products to the supermarket. And of course, that's really important for people to understand. And this is one I think that you could really bring in and help our students kind of relate, some of their experiences over the past year. If we think about, the spring when there were shortages of different types of products in the grocery stores, we can think about, again, the disruption in the supply chain. So again, I think they would be able to relate to that and connect again why it's important to understand and protect that supply chain. So again, the posters we're going to look at here come from those two different collections. But we're going to think about them as related to things we might see in the workplace. So if you think about it, you can have your students think about what types of posters do they see in their schools? And so they can think about that sort of as their workplace. If you're working with older students who might have jobs, you can have them think about what types of posters they see in their jobs. So here are two examples of posters that are pretty commonplace in today's area. So we see one, of course, about preventing the spread of COVID, and then the other about workplace safety. And so again, kind of common themes, common messages that we might see, and we can again see that use of both imagery and text to kind of reinforce these messages. So after kind of giving your students a chance to think of some kind of modern day examples of this, then we're going to look at again some of these historic examples. And what we're doing with this is we wanted them to think about when reading a poster.
No, we lost her.
Oh, we definitely lost her. Okay. Well, I'm sure that she'll jump back on when she can. I know that she's experimenting with a different location for filming herself today, so maybe that has something to do with it. So yeah, I know 2020 strikes again. It's our last digging in of 2020, and of course we had to have something like this happen. But let's just keep things going a bit. So I hate to kind of interrupt the flow of that one, but I also don't want to take over Kira's presentation from her should she jump back on very quickly. And so I don't know, October, do you think that you could show us some about your World War I posters that you did for the newsletter, and then we'll come back to Kira when she's able to join us?
Yeah, no problem. Let me just share
Okay,
my screen.
thanks for being spontaneous, everybody.
Okay. So for my lesson idea for this December graphic media newsletter, I decided to do Women in the Great War. So the Library of Congress has a really good World War I collection of posters, which you can see here. If you just go onto the Library of Congress and then go to digital collections and type in World War I or posters, this will pop up for you. And I wanted to specifically look at women and what the women's role was in different countries throughout the World War. So I made this fancy dancy student packet that breaks down some of the posters I thought to be interesting and that I thought you guys could discuss in your classes. There is the US on here, so if you're just a US history teacher, there's some posters for you, but there's also ones from Austria, Germany, France. I tried to look at a lot of the different countries that participated in the war, and I guess I can show you some of the ones that I found super interesting. There was this one from Britain, and it says, "To the women of Britain, some of your men folk are holding back on your account. Won't you prove your love for your country by persuading them to go?" So I thought this poster was interesting, just telling women that part of their role in participating in the war is convincing their men to fight. Really weird. And then I found this one from France. This one was really interesting because of how many roles it shows women doing during the war. You have a woman here working in the factory, you have a woman here child rearing, and you have another woman here farming. So it shows you how much French women were doing to participate in World War I. They really did it all. But what's new? Women do it all the time. And then this other poster that I found is from Austria. It does have a translation. This says the 8th War Loan. And on the little, what is that? Like a pedestal there where she's donating her money to, it says peace through victory. So you can see this one's kind of targeted towards middle class, upper class women. And I thought it was really interesting. In Austria and Germany, you don't see women working in factories a lot in their posters compared to US and Britain. and French posters. A lot of the time you see them look kind of like these angelic figures that are giving their money, or they're kind of seen as like a goddess who's leading the chariot and then men are behind them going into the war. So I just thought this one was a really good imagery that you could have your students then compare, well, what were the different expectations between allied and central powers? You see this push in the US and Europe for men to go, or for women to go into factories. But I think in Germany and Austria, they weren't changing the roles of women too much. They still wanted you to stay at home, but also give us your money. So that's what I found that I thought would be interesting for showing to your class. And then you can also compare what, countries expected women to do in World War I and how that was different based on the country. So that was my lesson idea.
Thank you, October. And I think that Kira has rejoined the land of the connected. So we'll turn it back over to her.
Yeah, sorry guys, we had a little technical difficulties here at my house. So let me bring this back up here. All right, so again, so back to what we're talking about, this particular poster, and thinking about what the main idea of this poster is. So again, in the chat box, if you would, what do you think the main idea here is? So get up, make it happen, work hard. Yeah, so this one is really kind of, hitting on promoting a good work ethic, right? So, being active and being a hard worker. So what are some of the supporting details that really kind of are reinforcing that message? Yeah, the way his chair is tilted back, he looks very relaxed, right? He's kind of like feet up on the desk, propped up. His shoes are untied. He's a little disheveled. Yeah, the stuff that's thrown away there in the waste paper basket. So, he's kind of the antithesis of the message of this, right? So yeah, so there's a really interesting kind of juxtaposition between what the text is saying versus the how the opposite is being portrayed here. To kind of encourage you, don't be like this guy, right? So how effective do you think this mix of imagery and text is in kind of getting that point across? What do you think would just kind of stand out to you if you were to see this? Someone had mentioned earlier the use of the phrasing at the bottom, pluck makes luck. It's a really great line there. So yeah, it's this whole idea of like not being seen as lazy. So again, this is a really interesting kind of combination. I like the color palette on this one also kind of stood out to me as I was looking at it. All right, so let's look at the next example. So this one, what do we think the main idea here is? And don't let your fur get rubbed the wrong way, right? They could have actually changed the title on this one to that one. That would have been a really good line to it. So yeah, this is about teamwork, right? Get along at work. Arguing wastes time. It's about productivity. The let's agree to agree. And of course, what are some of the supporting details that we see here that kind of reinforce that message? So yeah, it's this interesting juxtaposition of the two animals, right? So we see the dog kind of with his head tilted. You know, looks like he's trying to get along, but the cat is, you know, kind of bowed up and hissing, and you know, it looks like maybe is the one that's more of the aggressor here. Um, so how effective do you think this poster is in kind of getting across you know, its use of the text and the imagery to kind of get that point of teamwork and conformity? So the thing that I liked about this one, of course, is that it does utilize, you know, your cats and your dogs, and of course this whole idea that they don't get along. So yeah, it's interesting in kind of its use of that, you know, that old kind of wives' tale. So let's think about the next one, the last one. So this one is one from the WPA collection. A lot less text on this one, kind of some stark imagery. So what do we think the main idea here is? Be nice to your bossy boss. Yeah. Customer service. Well, I hadn't thought about it from a customer service angle. So what do we think, you know, again, this is kind of promoting kind of customer service and kind of being nicer to people when they come in to your place of work. Like, what is the supporting detail here that kind of reinforces that message? So yeah, so the desk work. Yeah, you know, we see this, you know, big mean looking figure that's kind of behind the desk, and that's definitely very off-putting. Doesn't seem like a very welcoming place that you'd want to come in and talk with this individual. Yeah, he looks a little strained, right? Like again, this is doesn't look like the person that you want to see greeting you when you walked in to an office or to a business of any sort. So in these three posters, all kind of hitting on different kind of points of you know, relationships at work. So let's think about, again, comparing their effectiveness. And so I'm actually going to launch a poll. I want you guys to think about, of these three that we've talked about, which of these do you find most effective in communicating their message? And let me find where I can launch our poll there. Oh, thank you. So again, which one do you guys find most effective? No one is picking the more courtesy. No one finds that one very effective. Okay, just another second so everyone can get a chance to vote. All right, so tie, it's almost tied. So we've got 3-2. 3 people voted for the wish or work, and 2 people for the why bow your back. So could we get a volunteer who selected the wish or work to share with us why they found that one to be more effective at communicating its message? And feel free to unmute yourself if you want to again kind of share your thought about why you found that one to be effective.
Well, Kira, I said it was the least ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was very, very, very clear what it meant. Yeah, Rosa agrees with me. You don't have to read in between the lines on this one. You don't have to have some sort of shared cultural understanding of what these things mean.
Okay. So for someone who selected the other one, the why bow your back, why did you find this one to be the most effective?
Because it plays on the whole trope of, fighting like cats and dogs. Plus, it also gives several different examples of why this is not a good idea and what the downside is.
Yeah. Yeah, so this one, the kind of the examples that are listed there, yeah, it's kind of very clear and kind of, again, arguing those supporting details. So yeah, so again, I think it's an interesting collection. And if you're thinking about using these with your students, again, I think it's a really good selection. You can think about main ideas, supporting details, because there's very clear messages that are being communicated here. And again, you can think about main ideas and supporting details and having your students analyze those. All right, so to kind of build off of that, of course, you could then have your students select a poster from some of the other work WPA collections. And specifically, I pulled out kind of a subsection of those dealing with safety. And so you can see here with those, that way it gives you kind of I think there's about 10 or maybe 20 of these for you to look at. And they could pick one of these, have them go through the same process, and then you could have them kind of report out on, again, what they found in their analysis, and then have them vote on some of their favorites in this particular kind of subsection of this collection. A couple here that I really like, again, it's a mix of kind of imagery and text. There's this one that's about fire prevention. That's a really interesting poster. So I think that one would be a good one for students to look at. And then there's one for dog bites here. There's this very stark one here that we see that, of course, is about not mixing alcohol and driving. Protecting the hands. This one right here is another interesting one. Failure here means death below, safety first. And then again, this is another one. I love these that are very colorful. And so we see, work with care, a little more ambiguity in the imagery there, but again, it's just a really cool poster. So again, you could, using those posters, have students select one of those, have them get a chance to vote on those. And then you could have them, you could display them. If you're doing this, you're teaching remotely, working with students who are learning remotely, you could create some sort of online display, kind of sharing some of the posters that they worked with. Or if you're in the classroom, you could actually print those out and kind of create a visual display there in your classroom with some of the posters. Before I close out, I want to take just a moment to show you some of the other things, though, if you're looking at these particular collections. So the ones from the first two that we looked at from the artist poster collection, as I mentioned, this is a huge collection. And so there's like 4,000 different posters in here spanning multiple centuries. So lots of different types of things that you can find here. And so on the About This Collection page, you see that there's a background and scope, and you see that they actually give you some examples from the collection there. And so, there are some Art Deco posters that they have here. The psychedelic ones are really cool. Now, I will say, again, there's a lot of these posters that are, there's about 1,000 of them that are uncertain copyright, and so you can't get those larger JPEG files. So unfortunately, the psychedelic ones, there's a lot of those that fall under that category. So like this one right here about not smoking falls in that category. The Jimi Hendrix poster does as well. But you can easily filter those out using the access condition here and just do the ones that are available online. And then that will kind of filter those out as you're looking through these. So you also have a chance, they have featured here some 1890s well-known artists and some of the posters that they have, again, examples there. And then they have some subject categories that are here that have been pre-selected as well that you can kind of browse through. If you want to browse the general collection, of course, you can go to collection items right here. And again, what I would recommend first off doing is switching it to the access conditions so that it is just those that are available online only. And then you can use the subject heading in order to really kind of filter and kind of scan through these pretty quickly. I would also recommend, specifically with the poster collection, make use of the grid option here on your view. And that way it's going to give you about 100 of them. And you see that, you know, it gives you a little bit of a larger image of those that you can see them a little better. And so you can pretty quickly kind of look through these and kind of see some of the posters that are there. Some of my favorites within any of these are some of the travel posters. They are just, the imagery in them is great. This particular collection, also I noticed on some of these first few pages, there's a lot of World War I posters. So again, that's something, if you teach that era, there's a lot of great stuff there that you can make use of within those poster collections. And again, you'll note that they're not just US. There are a lot of posters from both our Allied powers, as well as there's a lot of German posters as well in here. So again, I highly encourage you just, you know, take a chance to, you know, go through here, do some browsing. Again, these are really fun collections to look at and to think about how you can use them with students. And you can also, of course, think about with your students who are more creative, if you've used these in class, then giving them a chance to actually create their own posters. I think that, you know, they can begin to model some of the, you know, the styles and approaches that they see in these and create some really fun work for your class. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Stacy.
All right, and I'm going to kind of pick up where Kira left off and show you some additional resources that have different collections of graphic media that are linked to also from our newsletter. So more of the same. All right, so let's see if oh, hi, Suzanne's dog. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. Okay, I am going to share my screen. Hopefully I will share the correct thing. Yes, here we are back to the newsletter that I was showing you earlier. And so for starters, I do want to point out that even though a lot of posters and the kind of graphic media that we've been showing you are 20th century sources, we do have a lesson idea just for you 7th grade medieval history teachers out there, trying to think of what would have been the kind of analogy for today's graphic media, but in the Middle Ages. And so we do have a lesson idea that looks at illuminated manuscripts and from various different medieval cultures, including Persian, Armenian, French, Byzantine, Greek, and more Byzantine Greek. And so there is a student packet that goes along with that of pre-selected things that you can just give to your students in hard copy or online. So looking at how the illustrated page works with the text and how it might have helped in terms of like how people kind of access things in books. And the blurbs, so we have blurb, you know, background information as well as a closer look, so you don't have to even kind of zoom in on your computer. So going through those examples. So some of the stuff that we've already mentioned are in the important links box. But there are more poster collections. The Library of Congress has so many poster collections, and a lot of them are similar. Like Kira mentioned, you can find World War I posters in a lot of different collections, but there is a collection just for World War I posters. The World War II posters, of course, a lot of those can be found in the WPA collection. And Kira showed the artist posters, which I believe, yeah, anyway, are those linked to? Wait, where are the artist posters linked to? Sorry.
So if they are, I don't know if they're linked in here, but if you click on the wish your work there, and then on that bibliographic page, it will link you back to that full collection.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you can get to there from that link. Okay. I knew it was like kind of within a link. We do have some lesson plans that, use posters, use graphic media as the primary source format, including one about wartime rhetoric and mobilizing citizens that was created by one of our TPS teachers. Imagery of the Gilded Age, that's looking at political cartoons from the Gilded Age. And then a lot of posters having to do with home economics topics for, there's a subject that doesn't get enough primary source resources made for them. But I want to show you real quickly this collection called Popular Graphic Arts, and then the Yonker poster collection. So Popular Graphic Arts, kind of like artist posters, is kind of a catch-all. It's a huge kind of miscellaneous category at the Library of Congress where there's just tons of different types of illustrated things from the 19th and 20th, even the 19th and 20th centuries. And so, all the Courier and Ives posters that were extremely popular in the second half of the 19th century, you can see those here. Lots of different, you could talk about lithographs and talk, like I mentioned before, that different technology for graphic arts. Illustrations, things that showed up in broadsides and in newspapers. This one is really fun. It's a campaign poster for Abraham Lincoln and his vice president, Hannibal Hamlin. And I loved that sometimes I have this problem when I'm trying to insert an image into a Word doc, it comes out sideways. So you can see that happened for them too. And we have an early image of a beardless Abram Lincoln, where they even shortened the name of Abraham because I guess they couldn't fit an extra syllable on that line. But you can talk about, the use of American flags in different, posters and that kind of thing with this one. And so this it's just kind of a really kind of broad category. And if you want to narrow down by time period, then the way to do that would be just to filter your searches under date range. You can see the largest by far portion is the 19th century. But I also want to spend some time looking at this Yonker, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, poster collection. It's named after the man who collected these and then donated them in 1975. This is something that we haven't really used much of. Some of these are going to be, as with the artist collection, under uncertain copyright, and so you may not be able to secure a larger JPEG from the bibliographic page, but there's amazing stuff, and a lot of it is from that modern American period, which, if you're lucky enough to get to the end of the semester and be able to teach this in American history and in 5th grade, then there's so many cool things here. And just looking at the homepage, they actually put up a little bit of a gallery for you under certain themes. So here's this, the poster from that very famous commercial with the Native American with the tear rolling down his face when he sees all the pollution going on. It's a crying shame. And Goodbye Cruel World, here we see this kind of tree going down the toilet. Very stark messaging there. The Vietnam conflict, this is a great one. You have a bandaged Uncle Sam saying, "I want out." And it would be great, of course, to contrast that with the, "I want you," that we're all very familiar with. Posters on women's equality, the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, which still has not passed. Yes, and using the Grant Wood American Gothic imagery in front of the US Capitol. Don't Call Me a Girl. Civil rights picture posters, nuclear power. Atomkraft? Nein, danke. So no, thank you. I know enough German for that. Okay, political participation in elections, marches and demonstrations, world pilgrimage, Wounded Knee. So here's some more, Native American history as well. The Olympics. So you can see there's a ton of stuff. And, of course, Jay from the t-shirt and stuff. So there's so many things for teaching kind of modern America from this really unique collection there. And that again is called the Yonker Poster Collection. And we link to it from the important links box. We also have a lesson idea in this issue on log cabin symbolism. I know that we have a previous lesson idea looking at Abraham Lincoln's log cabin, but this takes a different tack and looks at this kind of as election propaganda and how like this graphic image of a log cabin has come to really mean something political in the United States. And this also has a student packet that goes with that. And then here is the one that October was telling us about. And then I just want to show you our page 4 sources real fast. I'm going to take a closer look at this one in a second, but this one, Bobby Seale in the Black Panthers poster, this is one from the Yonker Poster Collection. And here is a person that maybe your students have heard of the Black Panthers, but they may not have heard of Bobby Seale. So this is an interesting story that you can bring out as one of these kind of lesser known voices that has an impact, on the national civil rights movement, and this very striking poster to go along with it. And then of course, because we just love the WPA poster collection so much, and we have been using it since 2008 in our resources, and it still has not run out on us. So both of these posters, 2 very different types of posters, but from the same WPA collection. This charming little "Enjoy, Don't Destroy" from the Federal Art Project, and then a wartime Stamp Out the Axis with a very clear message here for the Allied powers. And then I had never heard of or seen this before in my life until I started searching for graphic media at the Library of Congress. And this is America's first graphic novel. And, your young students might be very into graphic novels. I know I have a 3rd grade daughter and she reads graphic novels just as much as she reads things like Harry Potter. They are just very, and of course, I know Suzanne, our librarian here, can tell us about that too, but they're all over the place. And so it's a format that your students might already be familiar with. But so here's here is a blog. Now, the book itself is not available to be viewed in its entirety through the Library of Congress. They have it, but it's not totally been digitized. But if you look at this blog article, it has like 2 or 3 of the very, very, very striking images from this book, and it tells you about him too. It's called God's Man, and it was written in 1927. And when I say written, I don't really mean written. It came out in 1927. There are no words. This is a purely graphic novel because it tells a story in woodcuts. And woodcuts I love. They're a very 16th and 17th century type of artwork. But just look at this grinning skull here, and how striking that is in this kind of black and white imagery. And it was, 1929, my bad. And it was created by this artist named Lynd Ward. And it tells a story about an artist who makes a deal with a stranger for this magic paintbrush. And he goes on to become famous, but his life means nothing. And then the stranger comes back and the artist goes and runs off a cliff. And so it's not really a happy story, but it's an extremely influential just art book that had in turn gone on to influence a lot of graphic novelists, like the famous one Mouse that came out about World War II. That artist was very influenced by this right here. And so here's a picture of one of his tools that he uses, and here he is falling off a cliff at the end. And it tells you a bit more about his life story and what some of Lynn Ward's influences were. But so that is just kind of a nice little anecdote. Your art teachers might be very interested in that. But again, it giving your students a better sense of kind of what a graphic novel is and the history of the genre itself, and how can you tell a story in pictures without any text. I mean, that's actually a really good challenge to them in critical thinking. All right, I am going to show you one last resource that is actually not linked to from our newsletter, because it is something that has just come out, and that is on the Padlet for today. We have 3 different coloring pages. So these are examples of graphic media on different famous well-known women of Rutherford County, which of course is where we are here in Murfreesboro. So highlighting 3 different famous women: Annie Brawley Jackson, Myrtle Glanton Lord, and Sarah Childress Polk. And so you can print these out straight off our Padlet. And these were actually created by the Cultural Arts Murfreesboro as part of a project called Leading Ladies of Rutherford County History, Women Who Inspire Us. And if you're interested in wanting to know more about this project, we have a brochure that goes with it. Antoinette, if there's anything that I'm leaving out here that I need to save, you could drop that in the chat box or chime in. But I'm just going to show you kind of a close-up of what one of these looks like. It's just got some history about the person. And okay, I'm sorry, it's not coming up. Oh, here we are. Okay, so really nicely done. Some of her accomplishments, a quote, and then again the citation. So those are available for you more before anybody else. 3 examples of this that are in the Padlet that you can find. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Kira for some wrap up.
All right. Thank you, Stacey. So again, just to remind everyone again how to find that Padlet, you can either use the QR code here or here is the web address so that you can access, again, those coloring pages, the newsletter itself, or any of our other resources. So as we go forward, for all of our folks participating with us live on Zoom, we've got your name entered into our giveaway wheel, and we're going to bring that up here in just a second. And while October's getting that ready for us to spin, I also want to remind you guys that we do want to hear your feedback. So if you would please take a moment to complete our short survey, and we'll drop this link into the chat box for you so that you can fill that out. And if you're watching this later on, or you happen to be watching this on our Facebook page, we invite you to fill out that survey too. And we will, of course, be happy to award you professional development credit for having watched this webinar. We will be taking a break for January and not doing one of these sessions in January, and coming back and doing one in February. So be looking in our newsletter in January for information about webinars and activities for 2021. We are going to be doing several different things going into the new year. And if, of course, you have suggestions, we would love to hear that. So I'm going to stop my share so that October can bring up our wheel, and we can see who gets a book today.
Yep. So this month we're giving away this book, Historical Thinking and Other Unnatural Acts by Sam Weinberg. So let me share my screen with y'all. Okay. Ooh.
Great. So Suzanne is our winner. Suzanne, just drop us your address into the chat box and we'll get that sent out to you. And again, thank you guys all for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out. We know how hectic things are and really do appreciate your time. So with that, I'm going to stop our recording.